This is Truth Be Told.
That not only are there reptilians here,
new evidence of UFO fleets.
We were close to nuclear war.
To help you transform so that you can live your highest truth.
We're not being told just because we're not ready for it.
Radio stations of frequency, vibrational.
I was a homicide detective with LAPD.
UFOs increase. Visitations. Mystery, murder, and serial killers? That's what we're going to be talking about today. Today we're going to be diving into what it means to confront and interview a dangerous criminal. Our guest today is Jillian Lauren, an acclaimed journalist, true crime author, and fiction writer. Today we'll be looking at Lauren's latest book, Behold the Monster: Confronting America's Most Prolific Serial Killer. When Jillian recounts her experiences dealing with Samuel Little in her messages, an interview with Little, Lauren got him to confess to the murders of 90 women. Throughout her journey, Lauren got justice for Little's victims and helped bring their stories to light, as well as uplifting their voice of 4 women who survived. Behold the Monster explores getting insight into a serial killer's mind, as well as a mental toll such as harrowing process it can put on someone. Lauren makes the story accessible to a wider audience in the docuseries Confronting a Serial Killer. I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. Please welcome to the Truth Be Told studios for the first time, true crime author, journalist Jillian Lauren. Hello, hello. How are you, Miss Jillian?
No, I am doing well today. Thank you.
Wonderful.
How are you?
I am great. I have to say this is one of my favorite subjects is true crime, and we combine it with our paranormal background, and I couldn't ask for a better day.
Well, sure. I mean, I always think, in terms of paranormal, like, these impactful experiences, like leave some sort of like a story, some
Yes.
sort of imprint on like time itself.
I
And so
agree.
like when you're talking about true crime and you're talking about ghosts, I think you're talking about history, you're talking about the same thing, no matter what perspective you come from.
Amen to that. And I'm glad you're here to tell us your story. And I just want to dive right into this. Samuel Little, it's funny how we hear a lot about, Jeffrey Dahmer and, many of the other serial killers that, they made their impact in the true crime and just in society. But Samuel Little, we don't hear as much about, which I find that fascinating, that he was one of the biggest serial killers when it comes to numbers. And
Yeah.
I'm curious your background. How did you get into wanting to write about true crime and especially Samuel Little?
So it's interesting, Samuel Little is a fairly recent serial killer.
Right,
So,
right.
he was only caught in 2014, and convicted for 3 murders in Los Angeles in the late 80s. And so he had, a killing spree that spanned the country and spanned 30 years, but he was only in prison for these 3 murders. Now, I hadn't heard about him either.
Oh, really?
So the reason that you hadn't heard about him is because it was underreported. Who knows what else was happening in that particular week. Sam Little was underreported for a long time for the same reason that he got away with his murders for a long time, which is he chose his victims to be people that society considered already less human to begin with. There was a famous way that they would call in homicides of, women of color, in impoverished communities,
Right.
prostitutes, often drug addicts, marginalized people on the fringes. They would say, but for instance, it's a 187, it's a homicide on 5th and Main, and it's a no one, or there are no humans involved, an NHI. And that basically means, it's a victim that we're not going to devote all that much time to because they were somebody who was unimportant
Right. Unfortunately,
in life,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And less important in death. And so that is why, in large part, Samuel Little got away with it for so long. And then when they finally put him away, that like a journalist goes at a story in a different way than, a police officer. They want to get this guy off the streets as fast as they can. And they had really hoped the LAPD, who finally popped him, when they got a grant to run cold case DNA through the Department of Justice.
Wow.
Through the cold case special section, they began to run cold cases, and they wound up with 3 hits on this guy, Samuel Little. They had to find him. So their, cross-country manhunt to put him away, that was the primary focus. Get him off the streets. They didn't know, was he still killing? So the cops, however, who caught him really suspected him of many more murders across the country. So when I was interviewing one of them, Detective Mitzi Roberts, who is very famous in many communities, this big Venn diagram, she is the cop who Michael Connelly based his character, Detective Renee Ballard, on, which is the the follow-up to the Bosch character. And there's going to be a show about her coming out, or
Oh,
I'm not
nice.
sure when it's coming out, but
Nice.
it's being shot. And so if you want to meet the real person, you can read my book, Behold the Monster, because I was interviewing her about something else, a different case, something procedural. And I asked her at the end of the interview what she was most proud of. And she said, I'm proud of them all, but I did catch this serial killer once, and that was pretty cool. And I thought, oh my gosh, I buried the lead. I can't believe that, I let this go. And she explained to me that she believed that, it was largely underreported, that, that the evidence had either been destroyed or hadn't been re-examined, that, that this, this man may go to the grave with many stories that, many crimes, many unsolved crimes. And so to me, that lit a fire in me. And I thought, as a journalist, I could go, and I thought, I have a way of getting people to talk. Right now I'm talking to you.
No, but you're on the other side now. So now I'm here to let you talk.
As do you, Tony.
Well, I do have a question before you go. It's so when the police finally said that he has connections to possibly other crimes, it wasn't through admissions. How did that? Why do they feel like he had connections? Was it similarities to the murders?
Yes, they had been talking to cops across the country because it was a nationwide manhunt for him. Sam Little was a transient. So once they had identified these crimes in LA, they were looking all across the country. He was extradited first to Texas from, they nailed him in St. Louis. And then he was extradited to Texas, then extradited again to Los Angeles, where he was finally tried and convicted. There he is in court by Deputy District Attorney Beth Silverman, who also prosecuted the many serial killers who were active in South LA during the same time that Sam Little was. So, my hope is that different voices and different priorities, also the science that's evolving, is you're going to hear a lot more about Sam Little. Right. There have been, there were 93 confessions. They were not all to me. I participated with law enforcement, and helped them whenever I could. But I was writing a book about Sam Little. I was functioning as a journalist, not a detective.
Right.
So, sometimes I would pick up a detail within that process that maybe the cops didn't get with the questions they were asking. So in that case, I was able to be helpful in several homicide investigations, which is something about which I'm really proud. And also there's a documentary about it made by Joe Berlinger, called Confronting a Serial Killer. You could find it streaming most places now. And yes, and certainly my book, Behold the Monster, is, from a lot of different perspectives, actually.
Right.
Different, the perspective of the cops, the perspective of the victims, my perspective as a witness, learning all this about Sam Little. But really, I had no idea what I was getting into. I just thought there were probably more women. I could
Right.
get this guy to talk. I do a couple of interviews, get my like Jodie Foster fix. I've been
Yeah.
dying for my favorite movie in the entire world, that scene I've been dying for my whole life, and I get
Silence
it.
of the Lamb.
Yes, Silence of the Lambs. I'd get that like Clarice Starling moment, and then I'd, go home and write my 8,000 word article for New York Magazine and move on. And I didn't expect it to really consume the next 5 years of my life.
So what was some of your biggest challenges, doing the research for Samuel Little, and how did you overcome those challenges? And because I'm sure there were many.
The scope itself was so enormous. I mean, just to really properly look into one murder, you're looking for friends, family members, you cast a wide net. My intention again was to write a book about, really about my experience with this investigation, about the lives of the victims, as much as I was able to learn about them, about this serial killer. I had a chance to ask, all these questions, all these wild questions, like, why didn't you bury the bodies? Things you don't generally get to ask people. And where was I going? I lost it.
Oh no, your challenges that you faced.
Oh, my challenges. There you go. You just saw it. I've never in my life until this story ever lost a thread in an interview. I did many of these confessions by memory.
Right.
I was like one of those kids, they made you memory challenge things.
Uh-huh.
I talk about it in the book. I use a technique called a memory palace. And, one of the challenges of this was like the scope of the information was so enormous that it became like I couldn't cheat.
Right.
I had to start really behaving like a journalist, like logging everything perfectly, like absolutely being so precise. And I learned along the way. And I learned also, I think, to be a little more perhaps polite, I hope, and decorous, although some of my more indecorous moments during this like I am who I am, and and I'm someone who challenges authority, and journalists and law enforcement have had a relationship that is there's a lot of tension within that, just by its very nature.
Right.
Anyway, I was lucky enough to be guided by the best and also challenged by some of the best, I think.
No, I think that's the good thing about journalism and media, like being, sometimes you have to be challenged, and sometimes I think it in overall scheme of things, it makes you a better journalist in the long run. So,
Well, yes, certainly. I mean, I learned a ton. I mean, of course, you always you always wish that there had been a there had been a guidebook.
right, for sure.
The
Right.
beginning,
Well, it's hard to find a guidebook on how to interview a serial killer but
talk to the FBI
yeah.
or yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I know you got to meet him.
Yes.
And first of all, before I ask anything else, how did you make that happen? Because for safety reasons, for just, getting access to Samuel Little. How did you make that happen? I find that very curious.
Well, I established a rapport and a relationship with him before I ever entered the prison. So I went in as a friend of his. And I do tell you how to do it in Behold the Monster, but I'm careful to not reveal all my secret
Of
sauce.
course.
But I spent time. It took a lot of patience. It took a lot of time. It took more than more than a phone call to get into a prison.
Yeah.
It took more than one interview to get a confession out of, somebody who was, is now recognized as number-wise the most prolific serial killer in American history by the FBI.
Well, because approaching Sam, I mean, it's not like have you interviewed a serial killer before? And if not, how do you even approach that? It's not like you're going to interview, John Smith at the local barber for his business. How do you approach someone of that caliber? And then how did you gain his trust and get him to confess to that? Because like you said, it didn't take the first time out to feel comfortable enough for him to say, hey, I killed 90 some people.
Yeah, it was the second interview.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't going after that. It was an hour away in the middle of the desert. It was a nightmare. The drive, it was a nightmare of an experience.
Right.
It was like it was fascinating for 5.5 seconds. And then, like every turn was terrifying. It was a men's maximum security prison. I had no idea what to expect.
Yeah.
I just was following like the people in front of me. I had, and so how did I prepare? I think that there is this conception of me because I present in a way that might be a little more glib than I actually am, which might help me actually get in when it comes to getting into a door. Who little old me? What? But the truth is, I did a ton of research, and the Stephen Michaud and I can't remember his name right now, but the Bundy interviews were really brilliant. And I went in with, not with this sort of like, I'm just going to feel this out. I went in with several strategies. Also, I have an ace in the hole here. My aunt is a famous psychiatrist and particularly well known for being a diagnostician. And she was one of two women in her class at Columbia Medical School back in the day, and I talked to her a lot. She works at at Harvard and Mass General in Boston.
Amazing.
40 years. And I talked to her about, what it was like to be around psychopaths and what that was going to be like for me. And, and I was like, it'll be an adventure. And she was like, it'll be what it'll be. And she said, I can tell you what it feels like to be around a psychopath. And it works better than the questionnaire and all that stuff. So that it feels like they're stealing the shirt off your back. They're telling you they're stealing the shirt off your back. And at the same time, you feel inexplicably compelled to just give them the shirt right off your back. And that was like spot on the money for me. And always surprising to me when I talk to people who have met Sam or interviewed Sam or, fans who found me or some things, say like, isn't it so surprising how nice he was, how funny he was, how smart he was? And I was like, this man got away with murder for 30 years and crime. I mean, not got away with it entirely, but, was ultimately not locked up at the end, for 50 years. So you don't think he was nice? You don't think he was smart? You don't think he was funny? How do you think he managed that?
Yeah.
I was like, do you think the devil shows up at your doorstep dressed in like Halloween quarters, dressed like the devil? Oh, hi, can I come in?
Yeah. No, he
All
will
right,
definitely
you wanna get in the car?
He would probably dress up as a priest more than likely, trying to get on the
charming.
Charming, yeah.
Always very well dressed, handsome guy when he was young. Not handsome, not a white Bundy, sort of teen heartthrob kind of handsome. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
See, he was always, dressed real sharp.
Yeah, he definitely didn't look threatening, and that leads me to like morally and ethically going into this. Everybody has their own morals, their ethics, the way they approach life. How we treat people with respect and whatever. How did you go in and listen to these stories without getting completely sick or angry or just losing your faith in humanity listening to someone like this? Did you just have to shut that off during the interview, or how?
Well, during the interview, I'm so focused
Right.
on the interview that's not the point at which I get angry or like an interview to me it's a strategy game. It's not a therapy session.
Right.
Like I said, this idea that I went in there and just because there has been or was some criticism from certain law enforcement at the time that I would say, oh, I'm just a little kitten. Or I called him Mr. Sam or Big Daddy, these things. And, it's, and when you're talking about journalistic ethics, they were like, who talks like that to a serial killer? It's disgusting. Right. You're disgusting. And I was just like, I am doing exactly what I need to do and it's working. So back off me. I'm not I am not a sworn officer of the law. And and there was never a time that I was unclear with him about exactly what the transaction was. I was going to be his friend.
Right.
Friend till the end. If he gave his story to me and only me, and I was interested in writing about violence. I didn't start out saying I think he killed a whole lot of people.
Right.
Because, that's not how it's done.
Right.
Like, you can't go at it straight, like, hey, are you a serial killer? It's, I mean, I went at it sideways and every other way. And, believe I got a really remarkable story from a very deviant mind and also was able to bring, the voices of some of his victims
Yeah.
to life as
Which
well.
I think
You know,
that's
just
amazing. Yeah. That you did that.
became my didn't start out being my focus or my mission, but it, and then I don't like the word mission. I'm like not mission driven. It's it was just a book of observation and exploration, but actually, it really has become my mission.
And I find that, sometimes we start projects where we think it's just going to be a short amount of time or, a project, but it turns into a mission, where we want to bring healing to families or bring something to society or end up, wanting to change a law or something that can help humanity. And so I find that it definitely it sounds like it's impacted you in a way that, you're bringing some positivity through the negativity of what he did.
I like to hope so, and I always think that, anytime you take a narrative and make it your own and start to speak, like speak about the fact that these women were ignored, speak about the fact that even Samuel Little was ignored, like you pointed out, due to the fact that we assign worth in this society, based on things that perhaps we should reconsider.
Right.
Both as, a culture and in our law enforcement. So yeah, I am all fired up now. Now I do have a mission. And I'll be continuing with that. And you can follow me I've got a TikTok going on now,
nice,
which
nice.
is, that I will be focusing on a lot of different true crime, and my website. You can find everything through my website and my Instagram. And I've been working on some new really cool stories. So
I can't wait to.
I'll be
find
excited to
about
share them all with you.
Yeah, when they come out, please come back. And but I am curious because the process of gathering information about the victims, because a lot of the law enforcement didn't have a lot of these victims that he confessed to, but when you did get the victims, did you get their names, and then how did you ensure their stories were told with respect and sensitivity? Because that's a very sensitive subject.
Well, I mean, there were several victim stories that I told from the, I took a lot of poetic license in this book. And the sort of more lyrical and novelistic chapters are the ones that are from the perspective of either Sam or of the victims. And I did that by interviewing families. I did that by going and walking in their footsteps, going to their hometowns.
Wow.
I heard their stories from Sam himself, of course. And then, there were, really beautiful families that I still have relationships with who have, put, boxes full of from Polaroids and letters from old boyfriends. And so that I was able to reconstruct a narrative that I felt comfortable enough with to take it. And like I said, I would always, I do pray, and I do talk to the sort of the spirits or energies of these victims. And, I always asked every morning when I sat down to write, I asked their permission.
Oh, that's good.
I asked their permission to try my best.
Right.
To tell their story. And at the very least, it wouldn't be, that this monster was the last person to hear their final words.
Yeah. That's sad, but and the people that you have heard about from him, and just, is there one particular victim? I mean, God bless to all the victims and their families, but was there one that maybe stood out to you that would just, you connected to more?
Alice Denise Duval is the case that it's the case that I solved pretty much, like from the bottom up. The confession, I was able to sort of determine from him that it contained, it missed a turn. The confession. And so by doing that, I was able to locate the site of the body dump, and they were able to connect it to a cold case. Yeah. So, and then I connected with her sister, with her nieces and nephews. They came to Los Angeles to place her headstone, and had a family reunion. We all went out for lunch, and it was, and her niece and nephew was, many of them are lawyers. They live in DC. And I was saying, sometimes I don't know if I can continue this work. And they said, much like you say, you think you are starting on a story and it turns out to be another story. Well, I didn't think this was going to be the work that I was going to do. And they said, well, it seems like this work has chosen you. So.
Yeah. And that's honestly, those things in our lives that are put in our paths without us asking for it is the ones that make the biggest impact. So I think,
like I keep Alice here on my desk. Like I have a picture of her from Ancestry.com as a little girl. Yeah.
Wow.
And one of her dancing on Soul Train.
Oh, wow. She was on Soul Train.
Yes, she and her sisters dance on Soul Train. I mean, all the victims have different stories.
Well, is there, because I know when, Jeffrey Dahmer, not Jeffrey Dahmer. What's the one that was a lawyer? The serial killer. Anyway,
Bundy.
Ted Bundy.
I mean, he was, a law student. Yeah.
I know a lot of the victims in Samuel Little was prostitutes, but was there a certain look? Like Ted? No, it was just, okay.
It was all about invisibility, right? So,
got it.
I mean, the look would be like transient, anyone someone who wouldn't care about, someone who wouldn't be missed. He was targeting his victims, based on their dispensability.
Got it. I mean, yeah, I guess like you said, that's the people that won't be missed, probably is the ones that make sense as a serial killer. Have you done any research on other serial killers to help with your research about
I did a ton. Yeah. I mean, before I went in, before I definitely was ever sitting in a chair across from him, like I said, it was Hugh Ainsworth and Stephen Michaud did the Bundy interviews that.
Oh, yeah.
Where they got him to speak in the third person. In terms of when I was thinking about, okay, so like I may not get direct answers to my questions, what would be ways that I could, get an answer by phrasing it in a different way, right? Like I said, that's not like, hey, what was it like to kill people?
Right.
When he's saying that he's innocent.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, I did a ton of research. I read, all of the old Mindhunter work, all, the, original Robert Rensler and John Douglas and, I was Stephen Eggers who came up with he was a criminalist. He came up with the term the less dead, which had been misattributed to me. So I always try to mention him because his name is sort of like not as big as some of these other names. But, that he really did come up with this concept of certain victims being less or more dead than others. So, I mean, there isn't, I mean, there really isn't a true crime documentary I haven't seen. Not a
I'm
good
sure.
one. There's some pretty trashy ones that like I'll call it, like I'll tap, but
Right.
but
Yeah.
for the most part, I'm just like, like my husband, I think, and I don't mean to be gender normative about this at all, but I see women and women identified people will often like find true crime comforting in some way, and I think it's
Interesting.
somehow like it's like the what do they call it? Immersion therapy,
Oh, right.
or
Yeah.
or like just you're sort of running it through in your mind, running it through in your mind, running it through in your
Yeah.
mind. Like if I can figure this out,
Right.
and I can make it not happen, then I'm safer. Then I'm
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
That makes
but
sense. Yeah.
yeah, so my husband will say like I have like levels of depression, like like Jonestown, Waco,
Right.
like when we get down to Shoah, like it's
You're like, I'm out.
you're gonna see me for a little
Yeah.
while.
Right. I don't
But
blame you.
but when you say, like sort of how do you not let it, like lose your faith in humanity, right? Well, I don't think that just by looking at something carefully, that it makes me more or less likely to lose my faith in humanity. Like we should all be looking at the stuff,
Right.
and ask those questions.
Well,
Like,
I think it's
where
asking
is
how we
that
can do
faith and
better.
is it warranted?
Right.
You know, I mean, just by turning your head away and saying, oh, I'm gonna, whatever, look at the sun, keep my feet on the sunny side of the street,
Right.
doesn't absolve you from those questions.
Yeah. And I think humanity, we're curious like a cat, but we also like to keep to ourselves, meaning like, oh, that's going on over there. I don't want to know about it, but yet I want to watch from a distance and not help.
Sure, yeah, and also like I want an assurance that I'm good,
Right.
because that
Right.
person is so bad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right, like I'm a good person because I don't, like bludgeon co-eds in their sleep. And I'm like, well, like maybe we can use these stories to ask some more fundamental questions
Right.
about, where our empathy lies. Because, the question isn't just like, are you a serial killer? Because no, probably you're not. They're actually very rare.
Right.
But the question is, are you somebody who would sit on a jury of Samuel Little's peers?
Mm.
Like the ones who acquitted him.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't just law enforcement. I mean, he was, two women, I mean, absolutely caught in the act trying to kill one of them. And he pled down to kidnapping and battery charges, served 18 months, and left and killed two women the night he left jail, and the night he left prison in San Diego, and drove to Los Angeles. So, I mean, that was a jury.
That's just crazy. And I'm sure
or was there, yeah.
as a jurist, I'm sure that was not a fun thing to have to, deal with, of making that decision and letting somebody get out and kill again. So,
well, there's some pretty interesting footage in Joe Berlinger's documentary Confronting a Serial Killer, with one of the victims who is the last living victim of Samuel Little, who got to confront the prosecutor. And it's a pretty thrilling scene.
Wow. All right. Well, before we get out of here, I do have a question on how the public received this, and what are some of the feedback that you got from your book? And there's a lot of also people out there that are not necessarily mentally sane that maybe have reached out to you. There's a lot of copycats and other things that have you been fearful since this come out, and how are just regular?
No, I mean, well, I like to think, my first book was, the fear comes and goes a bit, but my first book was about a Muslim dictator. If you want, that was a lot of death threats. Still,
Wow.
there'll be like reviews that are, someone killed this opportunistic whore.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
Just basically the general theme of,
Right.
bad reviews of mine. But I definitely, Sam gave my phone number to people when he got mad at me. That was a favorite trick of his. Oh yeah. There have been people, there have been people who've gotten their hands on my phone number. And I've definitely been contacted by fans of his, by friends of his. I did a little in my TikTok series. I completely concealed people's identities, but I was Sam's next of kin. He designated me his next of kin. I got all his possessions, which included all his fan mail, and it was so bonkers.
I was going to say, I bet you those were some interesting things to read.
Was so bonkers that I started reading them on TikTok, and definitely had, some actually were like, "Hey, that's me."
Oh wow. You're like, are you sure you want to tell people that?
No, there's one who's so bonkers, but he's very polite. He's just like, "Oh, thank you, Jillian, for highlighting my mail."
That would be a little nuts to hear that response back. You're like, wasn't expecting that, I'm sure.
Well, I have pictures from like barbers with straight razors. Really send me like pictures of themselves. It's like, okay, I sort of I chose this.
Right. Right.
And I do everything I can, of course, to protect myself and my family. And also, there's an aspect of this that you just accept. There was an aspect of the danger of going to the prison that I accept, and that my husband accepts, and that my family accepts. There have been situations where, I was going to have to go to like a really dangerous part of the world, or there have been times that I have, and, means like my husband married a journalist.
Yeah. Yeah, you just have to kind of accept that.
He's not going to be the one who's going to say, "No, don't go interview a killer."
Right.
Did he like it? No. Didn't like it. No one liked it. My kids didn't like it. I'm answering for it now. Like my kids are a little older, and like, why did you do that? Why do you miss my soccer games to go talk to this beast? And, and hopefully we get to have that conversation. They get to ask.
All right. Well, unfortunately, our time is pretty much up, but I have a question.
Yes.
Your change on your perspective on the criminal and justice system and this criminal psychology changed. Has it changed anything about working closely with Sam or any other aspiring authors that want to do something like you do? How has it changed? How is, when it comes to justice or criminal psychology?
I think that, well, like my aunt says, she believes, diagnoses are a moving target, and she likes to start with trauma and go from there. And I think it's a fascinating moving target. It's a fascinating growing field, forensics, and genetics, and the like intersection between brain architecture the um and the double helix and junk DNA and all this incredible stuff. So I mean, what I'm doing now is getting my dissertation on on criminal psychology. So yeah.
Well, that's great. And
Criminal psychology, law, and society. So, I mean, I think it is unbelievably fascinating. And I think that everyone's going to find their way to it.
yeah.
That everyone's going to find a different way to it.
Well, his birthday is actually coming up here in a week, June 7th.
Yes, it is.
But he died December 30th, 2020. So, yeah.
You're right. Yeah.
And so since then, I know you said you kind of have some, the spiritual side to you. What do you feel? Have you had any encounters like dreams or visitations since we are a paranormal show? Have you had any type of him visiting you in any dreams with messages?
No, but I have his ashes. And so I have his, physical remains here. And there was a moment when I opened the boxes in the prison, and like the smell came out of it, and I just started throwing up, like uncontrollably. Like I ran to the kitchen sink and started vomiting just from the smell of opening them. And like everyone was just like, get this shit out of the house, just get it out of the house. It felt heavy.
Yeah, I bet.
But like I sat there, and I looked at those ashes, like sitting next to like the motor oil, and I was like, he's not here. He's not here.
Yeah.
Like, and he hasn't been here in dreams. I mean, he was far more so when he was alive.
Wow. That's interesting.
But what I do think is that the birds in my trees, I have this like it's like I'm Snow White or something, and I'm not. I mean, I have bird feeders out, but like I get these beautiful flocks of birds in
that's
the
nice.
street. And I've got house finches, I've got mourning doves, and I've got crows that will come and nearly eat from my hands now.
That's amazing.
Little doves now. And so I think, I talk to them like they're the victims, like that, I think of them as my riders or my angels or.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
that's nice.
and I asked, and I'm also Jewish, so I asked my rabbi, when someone dies in the Jewish religion, one generally says, may their name be a blessing. May their name be as a blessing, right? And I asked my rabbi, what do you say when you can't honestly say that? Like from the depth of your heart, you cannot say that. And she said, you can say, Baruch Dayan Tochat Emet, which means God is the one true judge.
That's probably a perfect message for Samuel Little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not my job to judge him.
Yeah. Yeah.
But hopefully I have echoed the stories of his victims and, and made this issue more visible.
Well, everybody can go out and pick up the book, Behold the Monster, Confronting America's Most Prolific Serial Killer with Jillian Lauren. And Jillian, one more time, can you let everybody know where they can find you, follow you, and check out
You can
upcoming?
find me on my website, and we have some wonderful, this beautiful necklace was designed for me.
That's beautiful.
It's a Samuel Little collection. It's a locket with a letter because that was how we began corresponding. You can find those in some packages on my website. You can buy it at your local indie bookstore or any of the normal places where you order books. I am also on Instagram at Jillian Lauren. I'm TikTok, Jillian Lauren author, and all the other things, Jillian Lauren something, Jillian Lauren author.
Just type Jillian Lauren, you're going to find her.
Yeah, you can get it all on my website, and please do. And also, if you're a victim of violent crime or you've been affected by a violent crime in any way, I have a list of resources for you.
Oh, that's perfect.
That may help you either with yourself or if you have a cold case.
Yeah, that's perfect, and I'm glad you finished with that. And we thank you, Jillian, for being on the show. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. You guys are always amazing, tuning in with us every Friday here on Truth Be Told Paranormal on the Club Paranormal Network. And I have to say, you can check out all of our shows Monday with Robert Hensley, Wednesday with Bonnie Burkert, and then, of course, me every Friday. And, more things coming up. We have a lot of events coming up throughout the year, so please check out our clubparanormal.com. But until next time, everybody, take care of yourself, and please take care of each other, too. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye. This has been another episode of Truth Be Told. Thank you so much for watching. Recorded live at UBN Go Studios in Burbank, California. Join us on social media. Facebook, Truth Be Told Radio. Instagram, Truth Be Told Paranormal. Go to Truth Be Told Worldwide for more information on upcoming shows.